Hey everyone, welcome in. Today we're doing a deep dive on sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability.
A word I feel like we hear everywhere we go these days.
Absolutely, it's everywhere.
But are we actually thinking about what it means? And to help us do that today, we're going to be digging into some academic research, looking at some thought-provoking images.
Some real world examples too.
Yeah, definitely some real-world examples as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a really well-rounded understanding of sustainability, what it is, and maybe some of the challenges around it.
Yeah, it seems like one of those big, almost overwhelming topics, but when you actually break it down, it's incredibly relevant to all of us.
Hugely relevant. So let's start with the basics. What actually is sustainability?
At its core, it's all about meeting our needs today without compromising future generations' ability to meet their own needs.
Okay, so thinking about the future.
Exactly. Think of it like living your life, but also saving for a rainy day.
Okay.
Except it's the entire planet doing the saving.
The entire planet's rainy day fund.
Exactly.
So it's thinking long term, but thinking long term for everybody, not just ourselves.
Exactly.
Now, our sources mention that this isn't just about the environment, which I think a lot of people, when they hear sustainability, they think, oh, it's environmental.
Yeah.
It's bigger than that, though, right?
It's much bigger. It's really about this balancing act between the planet, people, and the economy, often what you'll hear referred to as the three pillars of sustainability. We'll probably touch upon that a little later, but it's really about making sure that none of these things are happening in isolation.
They're all connected. Environment, society, the economy, it's all connected. Now, something else that our sources mentioned were these things called environmental worldviews,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of deep.
It is a little deep. It can be.
Right.
It's essentially how we view our place in the world, and that, in turn, influences how we act. And there are two big ones that we should probably unpack a little bit here: anthropocentric and biocentric.
All right, so let's break those down. First up, anthropocentric. What does that even mean?
So this one puts humans front and center. It's the idea that the planet and all of its resources, they're only as valuable as they are useful to us.
So a very human-centric view.
Very human-centric.
Humans are at the top.
And this kind of really took off during the Industrial Revolution around the 1750s. It often is used to justify using the environment however we need to for economic growth.
Even if that means depleting resources.
Even if it means depleting natural resources.
And I mean, that's kind of how things work now, isn't it? I mean, our reliance on oil and gas, how much we consume.
Absolutely.
It's all kind of rooted in that way of thinking, isn't it?
It's deeply ingrained in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if that's anthropocentric, let's flip the script a bit.
Yeah.
What is biocentric?
So biocentric is basically the opposite. So instead of humans first, it's the idea that all living things have equal value.
Oh,
So this view states that humans, we have no right to disrupt the natural balance of things. We should be protecting the environment for its own WN's sake, not just because it's useful to us.
so not just for what it can do for us, but because it has inherent value in and of itself.
Exactly.
And actually, we have an image in our sources that's labeled wrong, and it shows humans placed above nature.
It's a powerful image.
It's a very powerful image, and I think it really speaks to what this worldview, the biocentric worldview, is pushing against.
Yeah, that tension between seeing ourselves as separate from nature or a part of it,
Very different ways of thinking.
hugely different.
And I think it really highlights how differently we might approach this whole idea of sustainability depending on which view we hold.
Yeah, for sure.
But, I mean, regardless of which view we hold, there are some real challenges when it comes to achieving sustainability.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that our sources mentioned is this idea of resource scarcity,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of scary when you put it like that.
It is a concern.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's when an essential resource, so something like water or energy, becomes harder and harder to get a hold of.
So it's becoming more and more scarce. And we're already seeing this happening in certain parts of the world, right?
We are. And it's projected to get worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, and get this, guys. By 2030, over 50% of the world is projected to face water scarcity, and over 40% will face energy scarcity.
That's huge.
That's a huge chunk of the planet.
It is.
That's going to be facing shortages of things that we literally need to survive.
For sure.
Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and there just wasn't enough oil to fuel our cars, heat our homes, run businesses.
Yeah.
Things would change pretty rapidly.
Hugely.
Their world runs on those things.
It really does.
And to think that they could become scarce, it's a scary thought.
It is. And it highlights the real challenges that we face in achieving sustainability. It's not a simple fix, is it?
No, it definitely isn't.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest hurdles that are standing in our way when it comes to making real progress in sustainability?
Well, the sources that I was looking at, they all seem to point to a few key things. One is actually social and political unrest. When countries are dealing with conflict and those sorts of things, it makes it really challenging to get global cooperation on these big issues, like climate change or resource depletion.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to worry about saving the planet when you're worried about what's happening in your own backyard, right?
Exactly.
You're worried about more immediate crises.
Yeah. And to be clear, we're not picking sides here. We're just acknowledging the reality of what's happening.
Yeah, it's just fact.
The geopolitics of the world and how that in turn impacts our ability to really tackle some of these global challenges.
Absolutely. So that's one hurdle. What else? What else is holding us back?
Well, economic concerns are also a big one.
Okay.
If the economy takes a downturn, people might be less willing to, say, accept a lower quality of life or maybe higher taxes to support environmental initiatives.
Right, because those have real world impacts on your life.
Absolutely.
So if you're already struggling to make ends meet, and then it's like, okay, but we need to add on this extra thing to help save the planet, it's a tough sell.
It's a difficult question, right? How much are we willing to give up now for hopefully a better future?
Yeah, it's that classic trade-off, isn't it? Short-term versus long-term thinking.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got political unrest, economic concerns, anything else?
Yeah, the rise of nationalism can also make it more challenging to get that global cooperation that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, how so?
Well, sometimes what happens is countries end up putting their own economic interests ahead of global environmental ones.
Right, so it's kind of like everybody's retreating into their own little corners
In a way.
instead of thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Not exactly a recipe for success, is it?
Unfortunately not.
Hmm.
But we do have to remember that sustainability isn't all doom and gloom either, right?
Right.
It's not just about the challenges, it's also about solutions and creating a brighter future.
Okay, so let's talk about solutions.
Yes, let's.
Our sources mention this idea of sustainable development.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So sustainable development, it's about finding ways to achieve our human development goals. So things like reducing poverty, improving living standards, but doing that in a way that doesn't completely wreck the planet for those future generations that we were talking about earlier.
Right, so it's not about stopping everything.
Right.
It's about doing things differently.
Exactly.
Maybe with new technology, maybe just with a new way of thinking.
Absolutely. Making choices that benefit us in the short term, but are also responsible in the long term.
Okay, so is this where those three pillars come in, the three pillars of sustainability?
It is. It's a really great framework for thinking about how to approach sustainable development in a holistic way.
Okay,
So first up, you've got the environmental pillar.
which is all about protecting our natural resources, right?
Exactly. Reducing pollution, preserving biodiversity, tackling things like climate change.
Making sure that we're using those resources responsibly so they're still around for
For the future, yeah.
for our kids and our grandkids.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the environmental pillar. Then we have
The social pillar.
the social pillar.
This is all about people, making sure that everybody has access to the things that they need to live a good life.
So things like food, water, shelter.
Absolutely. Healthcare, education. It's about promoting fairness and justice so that everybody has the opportunity to thrive.
Not just a select few.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the planet, we've got the people, and then lastly we have
The economic pillar.
the economic pillar. And so that's about what? Building a strong economy?
It is. But it's not just about building any economy.
Yeah.
It has to be one that is designed to not destroy the environment in the process.
Right, so it has to work within the confines of the other two pillars.
Absolutely. It's about supporting businesses that are doing things sustainably, encouraging responsible consumption, making sure that economic growth benefits everyone.
So it's like this interconnected system.
Exactly.
Where all three of these things have to work together.
They do.
Okay, so we've got like the big picture now. But what does this actually look like in the real world?
Yeah.
Can you give us some real world examples?
For sure, for sure. Let's start with the environmental pillar.
Okay.
A major focus here, like we were saying earlier, is avoiding the depletion of natural resources.
Mm,
Both those renewable ones, but also the non-renewable ones too.
okay, that makes sense. We've only got one planet, right?
You do.
So we can't keep using it up as if it's an inexhaustible resource. What are some ways that we can actually make a difference?
So one thing that's really huge is reforestation.
Okay.
So planting trees
Yeah.
is becoming really popular, and for good reason.
I've seen those ads, plant a tree for however many dollars.
Exactly, and they can have a big impact.
Yep.
And then there's also really cool things happening with technology.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of innovation in things like cleaning up pollution and even trying to restore damaged ecosystems.
So using technology to kind of undo some of the harm that we've already done,
In a way, yeah,
that's pretty cool.
it's hopeful, right?
It is hopeful. Okay, so that's the environmental pillar. What about the social pillar? How's that playing out in the real world?
A big part of it is those everyday choices that we make.
Yeah.
Being mindful of what we're buying, how much we're using,
Hmm.
and then even just how we're getting rid of things.
So like recycling, composting, all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. These small actions can really add up to make a big difference, both in terms of waste, but also in terms of conserving resources.
So it's about being a conscious consumer.
Absolutely. Thinking about where your stuff is coming from.
And what happens to it when you're done with it?
Exactly.
Okay, so last but not least, the economic pillar. What's going on there?
Well, one of the really promising things is the growth of green industries. We're
Yeah.
seeing huge investment in things like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, green technology.
So it's not just a fringe thing anymore.
No, it's becoming more and more mainstream.
People are putting their money where their mouth is.
They are. And these sectors, they have the potential to create a lot of jobs and boost economic growth.
But in a way that's also sustainable.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Shrinking our environmental footprint while also creating prosperity.
So it's kind of that win-win that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Are there any actual real-world examples of this happening?
Absolutely. In 2021, this shift towards green industries actually created a significant number of jobs, both in Alberta and in Newfoundland,
Okay.
which just goes to show that it is possible to move towards a more sustainable economic model without necessarily sacrificing growth and prosperity.
It's actually really inspiring to see these kind of changes happening.
It is.
It gives me hope that a more sustainable future is possible.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a journey, not a destination, right?
Right.
There's going to be bumps in the road, but
Of course, yeah.
the more we understand about these issues,
Yeah,
the better decisions we can all make, right?
absolutely, yeah. Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly.
So, as we kind of wrap up our deep dive today, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think, honestly, the biggest one is just how interconnected everything is.
Yeah,
We can't just focus on the environment and think that that's going to solve everything.
right.
The social and economic factors, they play a huge role too.
Huge role.
It always circles back to those three pillars of sustainability.
Yeah, and realizing that our own worldview kind of colors how we approach these issues.
Absolutely.
Whether we lean more anthropocentric or biocentric,
For sure.
that's going to influence how we act, what we think is right.
It really is. And it's okay to kind of fall somewhere in between those two, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's 100% one or the other,
Right.
but just being aware of our own biases and being open to other perspectives.
Yeah, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just about being informed
Exactly.
and being thoughtful about these issues.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we can all do, regardless of where we stand on these issues.
We can all do a little bit better.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up, maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with.
Yeah.
Think about where you see yourself within those environmental worldviews.
Yeah, it's a good question.
How does your perspective, how does that shape the choices that you make every day?
It's something worth exploring because ultimately sustainability depends on all of us,
Yeah.
right? It's about what we do.
What we do. Well said. And on that note, we'll let you continue your own deep dive into the world of sustainability.
Can be continued.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.